All right, good evening. Welcome to After Wednesday. I'm your host, Jeffrey Hayes. Back after a couple weeks off. I had to take some time off to go to Chicago on business, and then last weekend I got caught up in the insanity that is the Sidewalk Film Festival down here in Birmingham, Alabama, where I live. This week on the show, we're talking about the genre, or we're going to try to define the genre of Bio-Noir. And the comic series Ballistic from artist Derek Roberts. And my guest tonight, writer and director Adam Egypt Mortimer. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thanks, man. It's fun to be here.
Oh, great.
Exciting. So we're gonna be defining a genre. That's cool.
I hope so. That's the feeling that I get when I was initially reading Ballistic. That's kind of that feeling I got with it, and of course reading your extensive notes and extras, and I want to get to that in just a moment. But for some of you who might not know, up here on the web right now, I'm going to show your website over. It's over at the Wix site. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think if you the easiest way is if you type in AdamEgyptMortimer.com, it redirects to the Wix. I've been lazy about making that domain work. But yeah, just my name, AdamEgyptMortimer.com, goes to the website.
Okay, and I'm bringing that up now for everyone to see here.
And I don't know if the people checking out the show are familiar with the comic or not.
Mm-hmm.
But in case people are not familiar with it, it's essentially the story about a man who is an air conditioning repairman who wishes that he was a famous criminal, and his best friend / enemy, which is a psychotic talking gun, and it takes place in a city in the near future called Repo City State, where it's possible to have technology like psychotic talking guns.
Right. And I want to touch on a moment too that this idea with Ballistic on one of the websites that you do a Tumblr on Bio-Noir, and I guess is that sort of a way to try to or define it better, or what's your hope?
Yeah, very much. It was sort of the setting up that Tumblr was like to publicly create a scrapbook of ideas that had to do with Ballistic, and before the comic got published, I had been developing folders on my computer full of images and clippings and news articles and things like that, and to create, I guess, a source book, so that we would have a high density of ideas to play with, and there's even I made like a kind of 30-page source book before Derek ever started drawing the book that went just to Derek and Diego, the colorist, and to the guys at Black Mask Studios who published it, so that we could see, what is this city all about? How does the technology work? And so right about the time we were about to publish the comic, I thought it would be a good idea to sort of share that with everyone, and also, and when you set something like that up, it kind of motivates you to keep it going and to keep looking for things that you can share. Now, sadly, I think I haven't updated it in a while. I think after our last issue, and then I got caught up on working on the movie that I was doing, I haven't updated Bio-Noir for a while, but talking to you is making me want to post more to it.
Well, I don't want to guilt you into anything.
No, I thrive on guilt, man. If it wasn't for guilt, I don't know how I'd get anything done.
I can't help, when I was reading over the Bio-Noir Tumblr, and of course reading Ballistic, I did an initial review of it for Capeless Crusader, who I've written for in the past, in which you were nice enough. That's how I first made contact with you and with Black Mask. You were nice enough to repost that review of the first issue, and I was immediately struck because I'm a humongous David Cronenberg fan, and I could not help but see the similarities. So I was not exactly surprised when I went over to the Bio-Noir Tumblr and saw you pleading your love for Existence and Videodrome, and what does Cronenberg mean to you in your work?
I love Cronenberg. Cronenberg is one of my favorite filmmakers. Videodrome is one of my favorite movies. There's a lot to love about him. One of which is that he is able to communicate really wild ideas through film stories in a way that I think is really quite unique, and it's in a way that you usually find in novels or comic books.
Uh-huh.
Even when you watch Videodrome, there's so many ideas. There's people saying ideas. There's visual representations of ideas. The idea of a war, like an underground war fought by people creating new psychedelic transmitters that go in televisions. And the fact that he is able to get those ideas across through action,
uh-huh.
Through physical interaction, through the body. I don't know. It's that thing where when I see his movies, it really lights up my brain, and
uh-huh.
and I think that I love his tone, the way that he Videodrome only has 5 or 6 characters in it, but you feel like you're in this world that has a beautiful, creepy, interesting logic to it.
Mm-hmm.
When obviously, when you look at technology that's alive in our comic, and it's kind of gross, and it's kind of sexualized, and guns look like dicks, and cars have hair on it, you're going to think of Cronenberg.
Sure. Yeah.
Sort of the master of that. So part of the idea for me was to not rip him off,
right,
while
right.
still being incredibly inspired by him. And I remember a long time ago when I read Neuromancer by William Gibson, and I read an interview with him where he said when he sat down to write Neuromancer, his main goal was to not rip off The Naked Lunch by William Burroughs. and I thought that was such an interesting way of expressing the way that we deal with our influences, and like the good way of dealing with them, right? Like, I mean, one way to not rip off The Naked Lunch is to write a romantic comedy, right? So,
right.
So he clearly didn't he didn't like it, and he didn't want to have anything to do with it. He meant there was such an incredible level of influence that he was afraid he didn't know how to escape it. He was afraid he didn't know how to bring his own ideas to it. But there is something very William Burroughs, very interzone about the world that he created in Neuromancer. So I think I might have been consciously sort of taking that as advice when I thought about how I could let Cronenberg be exciting to me while creating this world. And in the ridiculous version of explaining what ballistic is, and I think it's really accurate, is that it's like if David Cronenberg reimagined Lethal Weapon, right?
Right.
Like that's really what it is. And I don't know if Cronenberg would ever want to do that. He probably wouldn't. So that's why it was up to me to do that. And that was the way of like really freeing myself from like, oh, how do I approach it with that same grim tone, and how what would Cronenberg do? Like I never thought that.
Right. No, yeah.
Like a part of the body, and then we run with it in our own tone. I think. Don't you think? I mean, I think there's something about tone that which is really where you can establish, what makes what you're doing unique to what your influences are.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know if there's something about that I don't know that has to do with the idea of genre. Is a genre defined by if you make like a wacky, hilarious comedy where there's a detective in a city, is its still going to be considered a noir? You know, I don't know. I think that's interesting. I don't know if it's beside the point, but it's certainly interesting.
Well, no, like you bring up a good point though, because you know a lot of people classify the Coen brothers as doing noir in that wacky sense that you're talking about, like The Big Lebowski and things like that. So no, I think that's a valid argument, and that's sort of what I'm trying to understand, because I've looked at noir in itself in most of the film criticisms I've read of it and literary criticisms, because you have to look at noir from not only film but also literature and try to separate, you know, or try to distinguish, you know, what are the differences and the similarities between literary noir and film noir. And what I find really interesting about this idea of bio-noir is that, especially with Ballistic, that you're taking the noir idea of sort of the chump detective and sort of recasting it, right? I mean, this sort of is he wants to be a big shot, you know, and it's sort of a rambling narrative, and it wants to, you know, he's just trying to figure things out. And I thought that that's kind of, to me, those were sort of the parallels I began to draw as far as like, oh, okay, I can see how this can be sort of classified as noir.
Yeah, I mean, so when I'm working on a project, I make like one of the shelves on my bookshelf be like a little symbolic sort of reference shelf.
Yeah.
And so when working on Ballistic, I have, you know, Raymond Chandler, who is one of my absolute favorite writers.
Mm-hmm.
And then and you know, so right next to, you know, Farewell, My Lovely, I have a book called Biomimicry, which is a non-fiction science book by Janine Benyus that has to do with how you can make sustainable technology by following nature. And then I've got
you referenced that book pretty. I'm sorry. You referenced that book in the back of the first issue in the appendix. Is that?
Yeah. It was that. I think I really perverted her concept, probably, you know, in order to use it to create the insane world that we created. But you know, she's written this beautiful book about how the you know, all of the answers to how we should be building things technologically is in nature, because nature doesn't create solutions that destroy nature, right? So, you know, how can we look at the way leaves work and use energy in order to build our technology that uses energy and that sort of thing. So you know, so I snuggle that book next to Farewell, My Lovely, and then I take this book called Biopunk that was another nonfiction science book about DNA hackers, and I put that next to Gun with Occasional Music by Jonathan Lethem, and you know, and then I take like what else do I have here? I'm actually looking at the shelf now, like a book about bank robbers, and you know, and that goes on the shelf, and then like a Barry Gifford goes on the shelf. Yeah. So, you know, so to me, like, I guess it's like if I'm imagining that I'm creating a genre, which is sort of like a facetious and ironic thing to do, I make the shelf on my bookshelf that would be that genre, and then you look at it and you go, oh, okay, I get what it is. In the same way that, you know, what the fuck is a horror movie, except that that's what they put on the shelf that says horror movie.
Right.
I guess we don't have shelves anymore for movies. We have Netflix tag clouds.
Right.
But you know what I mean? Like genre is determined by if you cluster a bunch of things together, and then you can find a common DNA. And you know, that's where I take a little bit meta, because the idea of DNA is like sort of the grounding sort of physical theme in Ballistic, and it's also something I come back to a lot and think about, like, what is the DNA of this kind of a story?
Yeah.
You know, is the DNA of this kind of story a guy who hasn't shaved for 3 days and he's down on his luck and he's solving a mystery, and the city he's in is alive.
Right.
That's the DNA of the story, you know.
Yeah. How did you decide? Because your background is, well, I mean, you're a filmmaker, you're an artist, you're a writer. How did you decide to finally make a comic? Why? What motivated that decision finally?
But you know, the crazy thing is, I've loved comics. I've wanted to be involved in comics for a long time. It turned out that it was much easier to get into the film industry and be a working filmmaker than it was to be a comic book writer for some reason. I mean, that's just the way it was. I don't know. It's just one of those crazy things. Like, I got hired to direct music videos long before I got hired to write comic books, but it was always an interest. And part of it was that I felt like Ballistic absolutely had to be drawn by Derek Robertson. There was no other way. There was no other possible world I could imagine other than him doing it, and it was really important that that be a collaboration between the two of us. The time between when I first told him my idea for the story and when he was available to draw it was years and years and years and years. So that was part of the reason for the timeline, and I'm really glad it worked out that way, because you come up with these ideas and then you spend years sweating going, oh my God, somebody else is going to do this idea, or it's not going to be relevant anymore. And I actually think it turned out to be much more relevant now than it was whenever I first mentioned it to him, which was back in like 2008, or maybe even before that. I don't remember now. It's been a while.
How did you meet?
I met him at San Diego Comic-Con. We were both living in New York at the time, and I think it was the Hyatt bar, and I sat down next to him, and we were drinking beer, and he said that he was Derek Robertson, and I said I was big fans of Transmetropolitan, and he said he'd just moved to, I don't know, whenever it was, he was living in Williamsburg at the time, and I made fun of him for that, and then we became drinking buddies.
Yeah.
And then at some point we were at San Diego Comic-Con a different year, and we were riding in a pedicab to go see the Aquabats play. And I said, Derek, I want to do this comic about a guy with a talking gun who flies around the city in a bat-winged car. And he said, I'm in. and page 3 of the first issue, there's this incredible full-page splash page of the car flying over the city, and the city is so richly detailed, and I think that he had been, since that night in San Diego, he had been like thinking about drawing that picture, drawing this car flying over the city, and then he finally got the chance to do it, and it's a beautiful image.
Yeah, I have it.
That's that's how you hook an artist. You have this like one image, and they get excited about it, and they don't realize, and then they get so excited about that one thing they're going to get to draw that they forget they're going to have to draw 100 other fucking pages of the insane thing they've ever had to deal with.
Yeah, I've pulled the image up for everyone to see, the one you're talking about on the splash page. It truly is. It kind of is breathtaking when you flip that page and you do see that splash for the first time. And I will say that as an advocate for still buying paper copies of things, that's still a great thing when a writer and an artist are on the same page in a comic book and they know the thrill of the page turn of the reveal. It's a really wonderful moment, though. You're absolutely correct.
I sometimes wonder if that should have been a 2-page spread. It would have been even bigger and you could see more, but it would have been cut by the spine. Also, because this was my first comic, I kind of screwed up, and I forgot that the way the pages were laid out was going to put it this way. I remember at some point we had sort of a crisis discussion, and then we decided that doing it horizontally and rotating the page would be so fun and give you a way to physically interact with the physical space of the city. Yeah.
Did you? So why? How did this project come to Black Mask and not somebody like Vertigo or Image or one of the other publishers?
We had the opportunity to do it with Image as well. There's something about Black Mask personified through Matt Pizzolo that I particularly really liked. I really liked how sort of hands-on and involved they wanted to be. You know, you do a book with Image, I think you do your book and it goes out there, and that's, I mean, I don't know. There's tons of great Image books. Nothing against them. I don't know what that relationship is like with Black Mask. There was a really interesting way in which the publisher and the creators are sort of collaborating on an overall sort of vision of how it's going to be presented and how it will go into the world, and you know, and that's something that they're still doing. There's more like media around Ballistic that is still to come out that the publisher is developing, which is not something that would have happened at Image. Unfortunately, none of that stuff has happened yet, so I can't point to it and say, look at that cool thing that they did, but there's stuff on the way.
Okay.
And I like their, you know, their sort of anarchistic vibe, and I like that they were particularly interested in the sort of strange and psychedelic and transgressive nature of this book, as opposed to just, oh, it's a sentient gun. I could see that being action-packed,
right.
You know. But I think it was a really good home for getting the vibe right.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting with all of the Black Mask releases. You know, yours really, Ballistic really does stick out, like you're saying, because you've got Occupy Comics, the Ghost book, or and then Matt Miner's book Liberator. You know, those are just Ballistic just stood out. You know, different from those. I knew reading the initial copy on Ballistic, I said, well, this isn't political. This, you know, this just looks like some really good science fiction, which always immediately catches my attention. And not to simplify it that way in any way, but I mean that's sort of really what I honed in on. I said this looks like a really, really interesting sci-fi concept.
Yeah. Thank you. I mean, I think a lot of the reason it stands out is because of Derek. You know, I think. I mean, look, it would sometimes spend 3 months drawing an issue of the book just to make sure that that rich details of the world were there. And I think if it had been drawn by a more gestural or abstract artist, it might have made me look bad.
Yeah.
Basically, like it's about something so physical, and when I send them a line of script that says, there's these sort of humanoid women in baths of liquid information in the bank, making high density, like bank transfers, and like all of that kind of nonsense, and then he turns that into something that really looks like what that is, rather than sort of just light and shadow. I think that's what makes it work, is how much he treated it like it was real. We both treated it like the city is real.
How much different was how did your script writing process evolve initially from the first issue to the last issue? Did you have to make adjustments to it as you learned how he worked really, and how you were trying to figure out, or were you having trouble trying to figure out how to actually write for a comic?
I wouldn't say, I don't know if I had trouble writing for a comic. I would say that sometimes Derek would say, look, traditionally, to make it easier for an artist, you shouldn't have more than one location on a page. So please maybe consider not writing a script where on one page they go to 8 different places in just one page. Please, for the love of God. So there was a little bit of that. There was, I think Derek was very helpful in sort of coaching me through how best to communicate the ideas in panels and pages. and he would. So I don't know. I don't know. I don't know that the fifth issue has any more clarity, or is less dense, or was any easier for him to draw. I think it was probably the hardest for him to draw. So I might not have learned anything.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I know we're running short on time here, but I wanted to ask you about your. You just wrapped filming your first feature, Some Kind of Hate. What can you tell us about that?
That was an attempt to imagine a slasher movie, like sort of like an 80s style slasher movie, executed as if it was a like emotionally realistic indie drama. So the idea was like, what if we? How can we take something like a Freddy Krueger type character, but make it into a movie where the emotional violence is as important and as real as the physical violence. So the slasher character is a girl named Moira who died years ago because of high school bullying, and she has come back now into a remote high school in the desert and is having her sort of unhinged revenge.
Mm-hmm. When can we hope to see a full trailer?
I really don't know how that's going to work. We have to finish the movie, which will be in a couple months, and then we have to figure out who's going to release it. So I will try to keep the world posted on that.
Well, all right. Well, we'll definitely repost here. Can you hang out 1 second while I wrap things up?
Yeah. Do you feel like we know what Bio-Noir is?
I think we have at least a good starting point for further conversations for folks.
Okay. Good. I mean, I would love to hear, maybe in 30 seconds or less, what you think it is or means, or if there's what else out there to you is Bio-Noir.
30 seconds or less. Oh. I'm going to say I can't.
Do you feel like it's something? Is there other things out there that would fall under that?
I have to. I would.
I read Top by Kurt Pierce.
Okay.
And I felt like that may have had, if we were going to start classifying things as Bio-Noir, I was like, oh yeah, they're growing pop stars in like gooey DNA vats, and then they're on the run in the city with mysterious forces. Okay, maybe this is Bio-Noir. Yeah,
so that's the new Kurt Pierce series, isn't it? Yeah. He did. He was doing. Is he still doing Theremin?
I don't know. I think that might have finished. I'm not sure if it's. I don't want. I have no idea. I don't want to say if it's still going or not. But yes, that's his series.
Well, if he decides to, I will inquire with him further on Twitter and see if he feels comfortable with us putting that new book in the genre of Bio-Noir.
Yeah, I would love for Kurt to join me in the gooey Bio-Noir palace that I'm building.
Absolutely. Well, I just want to say thank you very much for coming on to talk tonight about Bio-Noir and Ballistic and sharing a little bit about your background and process and film. I want to thank everybody else for tuning in tonight. Also, thanks for joining in. You can share the show via Google Plus over on Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube. I'm on Twitter at JLDPROD2002. Adam Egypt Mortimer, you are at Adam Egypt. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay. Our Twitter question this week, then, I think pretty much hands down will be, what do you think of the idea, or how do you define or categorize Bio-Noir? make sure you do the hashtag After Wednesday with that so that we can get some conversation going and get everyone sort of interacting. My thanks again to Adam Egypt Mortimer for taking time out of his very busy schedule to be here. And we will see you next week. We'll go live next Friday with artist and writer Carl Slominski, who's done a book called Golgotha for 215 Inc. I'll be talking to him about a couple of his upcoming projects as well. So thank you to everyone. Until next time, we'll see you.